actually, here we go. I'm going a quick summary of what we discussed today. So I'll start by basically saying that the first beginning part of our session, we connected to the last session where we looked at the key questions that came out of the learning discussion around impact and identified what are the key challenges that we're all facing. And we narrowed it down and prioritized the 3 key challenges that we wanted to talk about. The first challenge, which was from my group, was about how to connect alumni to wider goals. And I'll ask Maria to give a quick 60-second summary of the key points that came out of that. Go ahead, Maria.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Brent. Delighted that Katie from Now Teach, she volunteered to talk about her area, looking at alumni and wider institutional goals. And what we kind of discussed, and anyone can jump in as they see, we talked a little bit about the kind of distinction between vision, aims, and goals, and how those distinctions kind of play out with the goals that people have when they join or they participate or engage in alumni groups or engage as alumni. And we also kind of talked a little bit about that kind of distinction too, about that kind of those boring bits of work that can happen sometimes, and that the opportunity to kind of, in some ways, that kind of tension between co-creation and the boring bits that sometimes can happen with administration and operations of an alumni association when people just want to get something out of it that has a self-interest or what's in it for me factor. So we kind of just talked with it. I don't know if we solved any of Katie's problems, but I think we might have come up with more questions than answers. But I think that these are all important things to just be thinking about, as how can we connect our alumni to our vision, but maybe not always to the goals and the aims, or how can we also make this very transparent? So this was something else that came up, is how to ensure that that's transparent to our alumni, what the institution wants. And we had some examples that were brought up too. So I don't know if that's much of a summary, but it's a start.
Thanks, Maria. I'll turn it over to Abby.
Cool. So we were looking at short-term immediate impact versus long-term impact, and the challenges particularly around the long-term. The immediate action that we agreed that we could do are 2 things. One, for any member in Nexus who's actually done an external evaluation or any kind of evaluation of their work, to share that, because from a methodological perspective, but also from a language perspective, it could be useful, and we can all start to extrapolate, and maybe some common language can start to emerge, and that'd be helpful. The other thing we looked at is that whilst there's not a lot of academic literature around alumni networks and long-term impact, there is a lot about specific elements within networks and their long-term impact. So there's a lot around the importance of role models and a lot about the importance of networks and systems change. And there are pieces out there that I think are really valuable. So also to collectively as a network refer to pieces of academic literature that we use or have seen that might be valuable to others. And then the 2 pieces that we looked at were actually the challenges and the resources required to track long-term impact. And actually we shouldn't be doing it, or we shouldn't be doing it in a very one-dimensional, longitudinal way, but actually as a group of individuals or organizations, maybe we should start thinking about how can we change mindsets of funders so they don't look for that single-minded linear long-term impact of networks, but more thinking what are the methods that we can, yes, do evaluation, but that are much more open and holistic and able to capture the unintended impacts as well as the ones that you want to learn about as well, because we thought that those would be much more useful in a relevant and ongoing way for learning and adaptation. Please jump in from my group if you've got anything to add, or conscious that we're at time. So I don't know if we have.
Because of time, I'm going to turn it over to Diana. And for those, I also added in chat a message so everybody can also, Zain is speaking, go ahead and start writing your answer to the chat, especially if you have to hop off in the next minute or so. What was one thing you learned in this session and one thing that could have been improved? So that will be kind of our checkout. So you can start answering that, but go ahead and Diana, give your quick summary.
Sure. So we looked at further engaging alumni to measure impact. And there were only two of us, two groups in the chat. So we really got to deep dive into the specific context of each. Both were youth-led programs. So we focused on that and the challenges that each had to keep them engaged after they graduated from the program. We looked at specific pathways, laying out specific pathways for alumni after they've graduated to understand how they can be reintegrated back into the program and into the community to reinvigorate the network. And we looked at the differences between creating informal organic spaces and ones that are more structured. And we also discussed the time constraint and the constraints on reaching alumni, especially when they're in rural areas, in the times of COVID, when they don't have access to internet or phone, and how to go about that, solving that. So we talked about a bunch of different topics, and a lot of questions were raised, but that was good. We did learn a lot from each other. Actually, one's not here anymore, but yeah, it's good discussion.